to have a full house. I know from my own experience, like, you see all the empty chairs, but then they're all full now, so it's so amazing. And I am thrilled to be here to celebrate Nigar's amazing accomplishment with this novel, Under the Tamarind Tree. It is a fabulous and immersive debut work of historical fiction, and just overall really an astounding achievement. So congrats, Nigar.
Thank you.
She and I are going to talk for a little bit, and then we'll have some Q&A, and then we'll finish with a really exciting speed round, if everyone's okay with that plan. Okay. It's on. You have to talk right into the top.
Okay.
Okay. To start off, to kick things off, as Annie mentioned, this book has not even been released yet, so people probably haven't read it. Could you tell us a little bit about the story?
Yes. So this story is set in Karachi, Pakistan, and it alternates between the present day and 1964, when the main character, Rosina, and her 3 childhood friends are in their 20s, and they're all holding on desperately to secrets. And these secrets lead to the tragic events of a single night that changes their lives forever. And in the present day, a much older Rosina gets a telephone call from someone she hasn't heard from in over 50 years. And that call, just for this audience, is from Minnesota. And this person asks for a favor that might just expose all those secrets and ruin everything Rosina has tried so hard to protect. Dum dum dum.
Yeah. Exactly. Can you, since you mentioned the dual timeline, that is one of the features of the book that I found especially interesting. Could you talk about your decision to have 2 timelines in your book and how they kind of interact with each other?
Yeah. One of the reasons I wrote the book was to examine trauma and how it ripples through lives from childhood and beyond. And so I felt that to see Rosina at 2 different age groups, 2 different stages in her life, will show that if trauma remains unresolved, it does continue to affect our decisions and our choices in life. I did start with the idea for the past timeline, but surprisingly, the first chapter I wrote was the present. So I don't know how my mind worked.
And now I'm thinking about the prologue too. And before we start the 1964 and 2019 timelines, we have a short prologue from when Rosina is a small girl. And that is a really traumatic experience for her. So could you talk about your decision to, like, maybe what happens in that scene and why you started there, maybe in light of what you just said about the rest of it?
Yeah. There's actually a lot of disagreement about prologues in the book world. Some publishers really like them and some do not. So my prologue happened, it took place even before 1964. So it happened in 1947. And I just wanted to start with that because it sets the background and the tone for the story and the trauma that ripples throughout the story. Yeah.
It seems like, and for the audience's benefit, you're talking about partition, a particular historical event in Pakistan, and would you mind explaining a little bit about what that is and how it impacted Rosina at the beginning of the book?
Yeah, so partition, just a little pause. So the land that is currently the countries of Pakistan and India and Bangladesh was all a British colony. It was called British India for about 200 years. And in 1947, the people of the land finally got their independence. And of course, everyone rejoiced. But that time of partition in which the independent nations of Pakistan and India were created, it came with a lot of chaos and a lot of violence. In fact, it set off one of the largest human migrations in history. 15 million people were displaced and up to 1 million died. So this is the backdrop of this story, but it happened about 20 years before the story even begins. And the reason for that is that my characters would have been children at the time of partition. And that's what I wanted to examine, how it affected their future lives and all of their choices.
One of the really beautiful things about the book is that Rosina loses her brother in that very first prologue. You find out that he's gone. And you see right away that she's still dealing with this reality at age 80, 81? 80,
Yes.
In 2019 when the present day timeline is taking place. And then you have her meet another character who's dealing with a really similar loss. Can you talk about that a little bit? Like, how do those two characters interact, and kind of what are you hoping for each of them through that timeline in 2019?
Yeah, so the 2019 timeline, I have always been fascinated by intergenerational friendships. You know, we tend to hang out with people of our age groups, but actually there's a great value in making friends of different age groups. And so that's what I wanted to do in 2019. So one is a teenager and the other one is in her early 80s, but they've both suffered similar losses. And so that's what I wanted to sort of bring to light, that they can still be friends and sort of be catalysts for their growth and their change in life.
That really comes through. When you were writing the teenage character, I didn't write this question down, but now I'm curious. Did you use your own teenager as a model at all for Zara in the book? And if so, how does she feel about it?
She is thrilled. You know, it's just natural to use the people around you. No personal secrets were revealed in the making of this book. But my daughter was about the same age, just by chance, at that time. And I was spending time with her and her friends. So I think all of that informed how I wrote her. Yes. And by the way, she came from sort of, Zara, the teenager, lives in Minnesota, and she travels back to Karachi, so she's very much an American child.
When you wrote the book, I have a few questions about your process, and I did get sort of a front row seat to the process because we've been friends and critique partners for a long time, which is lucky for me. Did you write all of the timelines in order? Like, did you do all the 1964 chapters and all the 2019 chapters, or how did you approach that as a writer?
Yeah, so as I said, my first chapter was surprisingly the present day. And in fact, it hasn't really changed. I think that must be the only thing that hasn't changed.
I didn't even think of that, but of course, yes.
It never happens. Things always change, but that one stayed the same. So after I wrote that chapter, I just went back to 1964 and basically wrote that with little scenes of the present day. And then in the next draft, I made those scenes of the present day more robust.
Okay, so basically 1964 came first.
That came first.
And then little snippets of present day. Did you have to think about, like, how did you decide what to include in the present day and where to put it in the narrative? I think this is kind of interesting, like, how do you put a book together? You know, like, how do you make this flow and to give us the experience that we eventually have?
Yeah, it's very much like a puzzle, like a jigsaw puzzle. That's what I think. I love jigsaw puzzles. I know most people here may not, but it makes your brain tired trying to figure out which chapter goes where, which scene goes where. And so it is a lot of trial and error, you know, writing, and then as my English teachers used to say, writing is rewriting. So you just keep on rewriting until someone says, if you're lucky enough to have great critique partners, they say, yeah, this works.
That's good.
Yeah.
It seemed like, and maybe this took a long time, or you could give us a little insight into it. You give us, like, you know, each chapter kind of builds in its own story, and then there's like a cliffhanger or a really emotional moment, and then it's almost like we change emotions, or we kind of flip, so that you get a little break from the intensity. How did you manage to do that?
So that was actually my agent's idea. He was like, he's English. He lives in London, so they're very polite. He said, should always try to balance the dark with light. So I kept that in mind and sort of gave the reader the emotional ups and downs so that they weren't always stressed out.
You, as I watched you get this feedback and do your revisions, you seemed a lot calmer than I normally am when I get my feedback for revisions. I didn't see like any tantrums or crying, and it seemed like you just really welcomed and accepted your editors and your agents' feedback as legit. Is that true? Or like, how did you find it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I really was hungry for feedback. You know, it took me a long time to get an agent, and so I was really waiting eagerly to hear what he had to say, his professional opinions. But of course, we didn't agree on everything. For example, the prologue.
Okay.
Yes.
You wanted the prologue.
No.
He wanted the prologue.
He wanted the prologue, and I remember very embarrassingly I said, "You want a prologue? But all the big agents say you shouldn't have a prologue." He was very kind and polite again because he's English. So he said yes, he wants a prologue, but he had an idea for one, and I wrote it, and I didn't like it, but I submitted it because I'm
very agreeable.
Yeah, I'm a nerd, I'm a good student, you know. So I submitted it, and he said, this isn't working. So I'm not going to suggest anything, you come up with something.
Okay.
And so then I came up with it, yeah.
I actually think the prologue is very beautiful.
Oh,
And if I was gonna make you read out loud, which I'm not going to, I might ask to hear that part. Because also I think that her grief that happens in the prologue with losing her brother, and it's very chaotic, it comes alive in this moment where her family gets split apart forever. It really comes off the page in just 2 pages. And it kind of sets the scene for everything that she has coming afterwards. So something else that I wanted to ask you about, maybe in relation to that, is that Rosina it seems to me that she really feels the burden of other people's perceptions of her. And it's very hard for her to, I don't know if she even wants to escape them. But could you talk about that a little bit? Like her need to fit into society, to fit into her family, to please her friends, and kind of how she deals with everyone's expectations of her.
Yeah, I actually thought that this is quite a universal thing, maybe to different degrees. Maybe in the culture over there, where we feel that the expectations are more binding, that we have to do as we are expected to do by society and by families too. But you know, after living in America for so long, there are people here and families here who also have those expectations, and whether it comes from the church or some other community association or just friends. And so she too, and of course you have to remember her generation, right? She's in her early 80s. So when she was younger, and the trauma that her entire family suffered, it really pushed her to want to fix things, and her way of fixing it was, let's just do as we're told, you know, which is not always wrong, but there is a middle road.
Mm-hmm. And there's such a contrast with your Zara, your teenage character, in terms of how she deals with other people's expectations too. How do you feel, another thing that stood out to me, or do you want to say something about that?
No.
Okay. Another thing that stood out to me was about guilt, like the burden of other people's perceptions, and then also this feeling of guilt for everything. Both Rosina and Zara seem to feel a lot of guilt. How do you feel like that impacted them, or what were you thinking about when you included that?
You know, I feel that guilt is often misplaced. We don't always have to feel like we did something wrong. Sometimes things just happen, even though we feel like we could have controlled, but we can't, you know. And we suffer for it if we really put that on ourselves, that, oh, you know, we should have done this, and then it would have been okay. So I wanted to explore how our lives are affected by that constant burden of regret, even.
Yeah.
And but then you have to let it go, because you have to heal. So that's what I was trying to see. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, when I've heard this question before, people ask like character first or plot first, but when I read your writing, I really feel like it's setting first. I don't know if everyone else, if anyone who's read what Nigar has written before, but it's just like you feel like I often stop after a paragraph and I'm like, wow, how did she do that? There's like all these sensory details about what it smells like, tastes like, all the things, and you feel like you're in the world, but at the same time, it's not really taking you out of the story. It's only putting you into the story. So I wanted to ask you about that. Like, how do you create this sort of immersive feeling for your readers? And are you a setting first writer, or does that come later?
I don't think I'm a setting first writer. I think I'm a character first writer. But setting was so important because, you know, in the media, there's a lot of news about that region, about Pakistan and about the Middle East, and people have ideas about what that place looks like. And so it was really important to me to create a picture, a true picture, and have the readers really be immersed in it without feeling like I'm lecturing them. Like there's this one tree there, and then it feels like this, you know. So that was so. Even though I started with the character, I did want to bring in all of the setting details without it being overwhelming.
It's not overwhelming. I think everyone will be just amazed by reading those passages. It's so beautiful. And I think when you have your character of Zara, who you mentioned is an American teenager, she comes to Pakistan and a lot of like, she kind of speaks for the white American reader who might be surprised by some of the settings that they encounter because they've only had this one vision of the region or something. So it works really beautifully in that way too. I have a couple more questions about your process. How long does it take you to write a book? How long did it take to write this book?
I actually start with a lot of thinking. I think for a writer, I don't write much. I really don't. I don't put too many words down. I spent months and months just doing a lot of research and thinking about the characters and why they want what they want. That I feel is the most important thing. They want something, why do they want it? And what do all the other characters want from each other? So that just takes me such a long time. And then I start writing and it's just, you know, deleted over and over again. This one took me a year of thinking and working on the first few chapters, and then about a year and a half to complete it after that. So 2.5 years.
Okay. And can you talk about I think people would be really interested to know, you've mentioned your agent.
Yes.
Maybe not everyone is familiar with like how you go about traditional publishing, but your story of getting an agent is pretty interesting too.
Yeah, that was very interesting. So if you want to be traditionally published by one of the, I guess, the publishers who do not accept manuscripts without an agent, you need to find an agent first. And so I applied for a mentorship program that was offered by a literary agency in London, based out of London. And I heard about it on what was formerly known as Twitter, when it was a nice place to be. And there was a deadline. You had to submit 15,000 words. And by the time I saw it, it was Friday and the deadline was Monday. So I don't write in sequence. So I put together all of my words and it came out to 11,000 in sequence. And so I wrote over the weekend and submitted it. And they picked 6 people for the mentorship.
Out of how many people?
Out of 1,500. Yeah. And the deal was that you would then be agented. You would get representation if you got picked. So, yeah.
But first, before her agent, his name is Giles, but we didn't know that his name was Giles. I just kept calling him Gilles. So I still call him Gilles.
Such a fancy name.
Yes,
Right?
but Giles, you went through a lot of revision with Giles before you even took your book out. It's called being on submission when you try to get a publisher to buy it. But how long did that take and how many versions did you do with Giles?
I did about a year of revisions.
I mean,
Yes, a year, and we did 4 big revisions. So he would just basically read that draft and give me a letter, often just full of questions, like why this? Who's that? Why did this happen? And just so that he was pushing me to layer the story better and show the motivations and why things were happening. That's what he did over and over again. But he really pushed me. In fact, his last edit letter was like, "You are nearly there," like a period after each word. And so I knew
that's a lot of emotion.
That's
for
a lot
Giles.
of emotion for Giles because he doesn't show that much emotion. But still, I was nearly there. I wasn't there, was I? So then he said just one last push, and then yeah.
Okay. And again, you did not seem to have a lot of resentment about this.
I didn't have resentment. This was my second book, and I didn't get an agent on my first one. So I was just really happy to have the agent and have his vision and his ideas, and I just learned a lot from him. Yeah.
So you're getting the idea. I think people know that it's hard to publish a book, but people don't know exactly. It's really a huge challenge. I was looking up some statistics, and I don't know if this is accurate, but I found on the internet, not on X, on the internet, that about 6 out of 1,000 people who decide to write a book will find a publisher for a book. So it's very small. How did you feel when you got the call from Giles? Can you explain that a little bit, like when Putnam made the offer? And how that felt to you, where were you, what were you doing, all of that stuff.
That's such a story because when the manuscript was submitted to publishers, Giles said to me, they sort of just sent it out to Penguin and Harper and all of these publishers, and he said to me, "It's going to be quiet now for at least 2 months." So basically that meant don't email me. Don't keep on asking me what's happening. So he said it's going to be quiet. So don't expect anything. So I had planned to go to Pakistan and see my parents. So I had a ticket, and literally a week after it went on submission, I was flying to Pakistan. And this was in February, and there was this massive snowstorm in Turkey. And I was flying on Turkish Airlines, and my flight got diverted. It couldn't land in Istanbul because of the snow, and it got diverted to a beach resort in Turkey, and except it was winter, so and so lots and lots of flights were diverted. I think it's the largest airport now in Europe, Istanbul. So all of the flights got diverted to different countries, and this was also during the time when you needed a COVID test to travel. So we were all worried that now it's going to expire and we're going to be stuck. We finally got our visas. Yes, we all needed visas, even US citizens, to exit that airport at the beach resort, and we got put into lovely hotels. I got up to my room, I connected to Wi-Fi, and I saw that the editor at Putnam wanted a call. So that is where all of that happened. And I didn't have a charger because they use different prongs. I paid $20 to the front desk to give me a charger and a prong thing, and then we did that. We spoke, yeah, the next day.
And when you talked to your editor, did you feel she had a good vision for the book? What did she ask you about? What did you think about that? About her contributions to the final product?
Yeah, she was great. The first thing I realized was that she got the book. She really got it. She got what I was trying to do with the book. So that was, I loved that talk. This was not an offer, though. This was just a talk. Giles is very clear. He said, don't get too excited. This is not going to be an offer. This is basically just a talk. So, sound smart.
No problem.
Yeah, no pressure. And I didn't have much time to research because, I was stuck there, and I didn't, and the time difference because she was in New York. But I did get a really good feeling from her, and then a couple of weeks later the offer came, and she didn't want any changes made to the plot. She said no plot changes at all. So we did about 3 edits in 4 months together, and they were all basically the things that are in my head that didn't show up on the page. That happens too, because you live with the story for so long, you're like, oh yeah, they know where that telephone number came from, but no, they didn't. So.
Did you find yourself, there are a lot of thematic elements and metaphors and stylistic choices. Do those come for you at the end, or do you think of motifs as you go? I'm thinking especially of gardening as a motif that Rosina and Zara share. You have the tree in the title. Where did that come from, and at what point?
Yeah, I think the gardening was definitely planned. I just felt like that's just maybe living in Minnesota where everyone is so great with gardening and I am not. I thought maybe in fiction I could be. So, yeah, someone actually asked me if, my UK publisher asked me if I'm a gardener. And I was like, no, I kill houseplants all the time, right? So, but that's what research is for. So that was definitely planned. The tamarind tree is also very much native to Karachi, so it's not a leap. But when I submitted for the mentorship, I gave it a title with tamarind tree in it, just because it needed something, a title. And those pages didn't have tamarind tree in them. So Giles did say, you know, congratulations, this is great, but like, where's the tamarind tree? So yeah.
And Harris has a different kind of tree. One of the main characters has a tree that has like a lot of offspring.
Yeah, it's a shorter kind of bush tree.
Okay.
Yes.
But a lot of, I'm trying to think, horticulture or something
Yes.
in the
A
novel.
lot of that.
Before I open it up to some audience questions, I know you hate this question, but I want to know, what are you working on now? They always ask you, it's really unfair. You go through all this time and all this effort and you publish your book and then they're like, okay, what's next? Okay, but what's next?
Kathleen, that's not fair. I don't want to jinx it by saying too much, but it is set in the 90s, in the 1990s, which you will be surprised to know is classified as historical fiction for all the people who are not in their 20s or teens right now. It's very surprising. Yeah.
And you have this international background. I have 2 questions about that. One is, like, how do you think that impacts you as a writer in terms of the stories that you choose? And also, what is the setting of your next story?
Okay, so the setting is also Karachi, a very different one from this book. And I think I moved around a lot, as you heard, as a child. All of those moves are before I was 18, so that was a lot of moves. I think one thing that it taught me without really teaching me, without me realizing I was learning it, is that people are the same everywhere. You know, we all have the same hopes and desires and fears, and so we may look different, eat different food, wear different clothes, but really everyone is deep down the same. And so that was also a really big part of this book, because I felt like if you do feel immersed, if I did my job right and you feel immersed, like you're transported across the world, then maybe you too will see that we are all more alike than we are different.
I think everyone will feel completely immersed. I'm confident. Let's have a few questions from the group, and then we'll come back and finish with the speed round.
Oh, God. Nicole.
So I was fascinated to hear that one of your timelines you're writing from the point of view of somebody who's 80 years old. You've never been 80 years old yet. So how was that? Because it's one thing, right, to like write about an age that you have been, that you've lived through, and even if it, it was a while ago, right, like as a teenager, like like you've walked those shoes. So what was it like for your main character to be somebody that's so much older than you?
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question. When I was in college in Karachi, and I lived for 4 years with my grandmother. We were just the 2 of us in her house. So she was in her 80s, and she's not, she wasn't a retired pediatrician like Rosina, but she was of that age group. And so I think that, without realizing, definitely informed my idea of an older person. Yeah. Yes.
I would imagine some of your ancestors or members of your family really did endure partition in the worst way or maybe in a horrible way. Did some stories filter down and found their way into this book?
Oh, that's a great question, because I do want to say that it's entirely fiction, this book. But when you read the author's note, you will see that my parents' families did flee their homes and cross the border into Pakistan. So basically just grabbing a suitcase and running away from the violence. So their experience, I haven't heard many stories about them, but I have to say that in writing the book, I've heard more, which is very nice. And none of those events in the book took place in their lives, but the emotional truths are always there, the feelings and all of the things that sort of hit you in the heart. Those are definitely true.
I also wanted to mention the dedication to your parents,
Yes.
which is really touching to me when I read it. And you said, it says, to my parents whose stories remind me, live in me.
inside me, yeah. Yes.
I have a comment first. I'm a strong hater of prologues. I absolutely loved yours and you converted me. Alright. And now I just wanted you to take a second and think, do you feel like a writer now?
Oh, that's such a good question, because I think that, I don't know how long it takes to feel like a real writer.
I feel like your novel coming out from Putnam makes you a pretty real
I'm a real writer. Okay, I'll take that. I'm a real writer. Okay. Yeah, thank you. Yes.
So you talked about how your characters are driven by guilt and worrying about maybe what other people's perceptions are. But I want to hear you talk about love as a driving force for your characters, because what I was struck by in reading your book is it's not an overt, over-the-top kind of visible love. It's more of a pining, sort of Jane Austen-y, like you feel it. But what can you
Yes.
say about that?
There is romance in the book. My editor at one point said, impossible romances. So it's a little bit of that, not very explicit at all, because it is dedicated to my parents. So we can't do that. But I mean, love is such a strong emotion, right? It's one of the strongest ones. And it leads us to do, and not just romantic love, but love for friends, found family. I'm really interested in that concept, and the things you do for love. So definitely one of the themes is how far you go to protect the ones you love. Like, what will you do? What did she do? I don't know. Yes.
It's so nice that your mom and dad are here.
Yes.
And your mom being a published author, did that ever come to your mind, gosh, Mom, you're so amazing, I need to write too.
I think I was born knowing how amazing my mom was. She didn't need to do anything. But yes, I would also like to say thank you to my parents who are here from Karachi. And yes.
So, this being like your debut, like, what is one piece of advice / or like an anecdote that you would give to someone who is working on writing something?
Oh, I think the single most difficult thing that I did, which was also the most beneficial, was to have other people read. And that's, it's usually, it's very hard. It was very hard when I first did it. I took a class at the Loft, which was a critique class, and that's where I met my great critique partners. We were friends online, and then we met in real life, which is always dangerous. but it worked out. Yeah, it's hard to hear critique because you're so close to your work. But if they sandwich it nicely between positive comments, then it's easier. And if you're just open to it, because it does help. Yeah. Yes.
You said that you had another book that you did first. And is that book dead, or are you interested in going back now, knowing what you know, and you've obviously learned the learning curve, and because it probably meant something to you, or is it just you put it aside and that's the end of it?
Yeah, that book took 4 years, and I learned so much on that book. It was like my learning book, and I did love it. But I put it in a drawer, and I think it'll come. I think pieces of it will come out. You will see. You won't know, but they will come out because there are definitely good parts of it, I think.
I love that book.
Yeah.
It has like more mystery, more thriller-esque
It
elements.
was classified as suspense, but there's always a little bit of crime in my books. I like that.
Are you going back to more suspense with your next project, or
I
continuing?
think I am. I might lean a
good.
little more into that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Any more from the audience?
What's the name of the first book?
Oh, it had many titles. So, because again, I got into a mentorship with that first book, but I didn't get an agent for it. So in the mentorship, it was changed. It isn't published. No, it's not published. Yeah. Titles keep on changing. Yeah.
With this title, did you come up with Under the Tamarind Tree when you submitted it for the mentorship? Is that the same title?
So the title was, what was it?
I don't remember.
Yeah, I think it was The House with the Tamarind Tree.
Okay.
The House with the Tamarind Tree, right, Stacy? Thank you. My third critique partner. And that's how it stayed. Giles liked it. He just said, "Where's the tamarind tree?" So,
What was it called? Do you remember?
and then my publisher changed it. Yeah, there was a big discussion on how it should go, and then
The house. So from the house with the tamarind tree
yeah,
to under
to
the.
under the tamarind
Do you
tree.
remember? This is the kind of decision that I'm like, what? Like this is a
This
huge
was-
deal.
There were so many emails flying back and forth. It was a huge deal because apparently under the tamarind tree evokes a sense of suspense.
I think it does.
Okay.
I'm for it.
Okay.
People always like to know about the cover too.
Oh,
Tell us about the cover.
the cover
and-
story.
Yeah, the cover
Very
story.
interesting. So authors don't get much of a say at all on their covers. The publishing house decides. And so they made this beautiful cover, and I said, okay. And, we learned to love it. And they said, this is great, this is how it's going to go, and now we're going to pitch it in-house to our sales team. So Penguin's sales team was going to get, this is before the launch. And about a week later, they came back to me and said that the sales team has been reading your book and they really love it, which is great because who sells the book? The sales team. But they don't like the cover, and here is the new cover that they like. And that's the cover that you have in front of you.
And do you like it?
I love it.
Okay.
I love it, yes.
And do you like this cover or the UK cover better?
Oh, so the book is coming out in the UK in November. And they have a completely different cover, which has nothing to do with this one at all. I think I love them both. Yeah, I think I love them both. They're like completely different books except for the title and my name. Yeah. Yeah.
Don't you feel like, I just think you just sound like the most agreeable, easiest to work with. Like, I need to set some life goals based on your demeanor. Okay, we're gonna end with some very hard-hitting questions. Are you ready?
Okay.
It starts really tough. Barbie or Oppenheimer?
Barbie.
Okay, I agree. Easy. Taylor Swift, or Beyonce?
I guess I'm supposed to say
No,
Taylor
you-
Swift.
But which
So
one
she
really?
said Taylor Swift first. Yeah. I'll go with Taylor Swift.
Really?
Yeah.
Somebody else?
I think she's just a phenomenon. I mean, what is she? She's just huge. She's a brand in herself. Yeah.
Okay, Taylor Swift it is. Rom-com or murder?
Murder. No question.
That was really
Yes,
fast.
Very fast. I love the dead bodies. Yes.
She's so agreeable and nice except for the stabbing. Well, this goes with that one. Sweet or salty?
Salty.
Yeah, that makes sense. But she seems sweet. It's like, okay. Pencil or pen or keyboard?
Keyboard.
Okay.
I can't read my own writing.
So with your drafting, you go right to computer.
Right to computer.
Okay. And then when you're redoing, like when you're revising, are you actually like in it, or do you delete the whole thing and start again?
No, I stay
You're
in
in
it.
it.
Yeah, I
Okay.
stay in it.
Mohawk or mullet?
Neither? I'm just imagining myself. Nobody else, just myself. Yeah.
Nice chin length bob.
Yes, with some long bangs. Yeah.
Okay, new releases or classics?
That's a hard one, but I think I'll go with new releases. Yeah. Because I think the pace of the newer books suits me, especially with Netflix and everything. We need a pacier book. Yeah.
Okay, that I did have on here, World Cup or quarterback documentary on Netflix?
I like documentaries. I do. So I think I could do that.
Did you watch it?
No.
Okay.
I could do it if that was the only option.
Who is your favorite quarterback in the NFL?
Oh, that's
Too hard.
not even on your list. You
Okay.
just made that up. Yeah. You just made that up. Yeah.
Okay, last question. Can you give us 3 books that you think everyone in the room should read?
Okay. I think everyone should read Kathleen's 3 books.
Okay, that's not on the list.
She has 3 books.
Three actual books that people
Okay.
should read, please.
So that's a tough question because it's like saying what are your favorite books ever, and that's impossible. So I will stick to what I've recently read. So one is Viola Davis's memoir. It's called Finding Me, and there are a couple of you nodding, so maybe you've read it. And she's the actor, Viola Davis. I listened to it. I don't know if you do audiobooks, but I count that as reading because she narrates in her voice, and it's amazing. And it's a journey from such severe poverty that she overcomes with just grit and courage, and it's very hopeful at the end. So that's one, right? The other one is a book called Girl in Translation, and it's by Jean Kwok, and it's her first book. I think her 3rd or 4th is coming out now. But this one is on some of the book lists that are going to be banned. I don't know if you know, but unfortunately in our country, book banning has become a thing. So I would strongly suggest this one just to support. You know, she's fighting it, but I don't think any books should be banned. You can choose not to read. It's a story about a young girl who's an immigrant from Hong Kong, and then how she works in a clothes factory and things like that.
And Jean Kwok has this to say about Under the Tamarind Tree. Captivating, draws us into the vibrant and intricate lives of 4 friends and their explosive secrets while exploring class, family, and passion in rich cultural detail. That's a coup to get a
That
Jean
was really
Kwok.
nice of her. I don't
Yeah.
know her. Trust me. I absolutely do not know her. And when we got that, the whole publishing team was like, wow, she is so generous. Like, first of all, she read it, and then she said this. So, yes, Stacy.
There's another group that is
Oh,
I think a lot of people.
Yeah, Nigar's editor is pretty famous in the book world because you might have heard of one of her small acquisitions called Where the Crawdads Sing.
So
Like
yes.
the #1 best-selling book of the century, Where the Crawdads Sing, is also edited by Nigar's editor.
By Tara.
Yeah.
So she was the acquiring editor. So she bought my book, which was very flattering. Yes.
Okay, one more book for
And
us.
one more book. The last one is by someone called Ethan Joella, and it's called A Quiet Life. And it's about a chance meeting between 3 strangers, and I always find that fascinating. How just it starts with a chance meeting, and they all happen to be going through some sort of grief of their own. But through the story, they come together in really sweet and unexpected ways to help each other out of this sort of moment of paralysis and learn how to live again, even with the grief. So again, it's a hopeful book and very nicely done by Ethan Joella.
Okay, there you have it. Everyone needs to buy the book and get it signed. And Annie's gonna come up and tell us some details about that. Nigar Alam, everyone.